Hello everyone. So in this video we are going to look at two things. The first thing we are going to look at is having a recap on creating a color system using the material design guide. And the second thing we are going to look at in this video is the detail of the next portfolio task for every student. So I would advise that you watch this video to the end so that you don't miss any detail, you don't miss any information, right? Because I think if you miss a part of the video, then you might miss the full picture of the video. So let's get started. Let's have a recap on how to create a color system using the material design guide. So from our last sessions, right, from our previous sessions, we went over this, but in this video, we are going to just summarize everything. So first things first, what you need to know is this. When you want to design an app, you will need colors, right? You will need colors for the designing of the app. And since this is an app, or since this is a product, it's always more complex than a regular website. So for the fact that apps, right, are more complex than a regular website, what you are advised to do when you want to choose colors is to come up with a color system, right? You're advised to come up with a color system. Now, this color system is meant to serve you throughout the process of designing the app. This color system is supposed to be your bank of colors, right, throughout the process of designing your app. This color system is supposed to be there so that while you are designing your app and you need colors, you would head over to the color system to pick a color that you will use throughout the process of designing your app. So that's why it's a color system. So how do we create this color system? How do we create this bank of colors when we want to design our app? There are many ways you can do that, but one reliable way you can do this is to use the recommendations of Google in the material design guide, right? And the recommendations of Google goes like this. Google recommends that when you want to start the process of creating this color system, the first thing you should do is to come up with 6 key colors. Now, these 6 key colors are the primary key color, the secondary key color, tertiary key color, error key color, neutral key color, and the neutral variant key color. Now, this is how you are to choose these key colors, right? This is how you are to choose, or this is what you should have in mind when you want to choose any of these key colors. For the primary key color, this should be the brand color. This should be the color of the brand that you are designing, right? So if you are designing an app and the color of that app or the brand color of that app is yellow, right? This primary key color should mostly be that yellow, or should be that yellow color. So any color that is the brand color of the app you are designing, that color should serve as the primary key color. In essence, the color you want your users to remember after they visit your app should be your primary key color. That color that you want the users to always remember your app for whenever they visit or whenever they use your app, right? That color should be your primary key color. When you use WhatsApp, the color you remember WhatsApp for is green. When you use Facebook, the color you remember Facebook for is blue. So that particular color, that color that you want users to remember your app for when they use your app should be your primary key color. Your secondary key color should be a color that can complement and live in harmony with the primary key color. Don't choose a secondary key color that would speak on its own, or don't choose a secondary key color that would call attention away from the primary key color. Remember, this is the main color here. So your secondary key color should be any color that you choose, right, for the complementing of the primary key color. It should just be a color that can complement the primary key color, right? So, and also it should be a color that can live in harmony with the primary key color. And we have explained this in our previous sessions, right? We understood what it means for a color to live in harmony with another color. Now, another point I'd like to raise here, just in case you have forgotten, whenever you are choosing a key color, don't choose a key color from this region of the color picker. This region where you have light, right? This region where the colors are very light. Don't choose a light color as your key color. The best region to go to in your color picker when you are trying to choose any key color is this region here, where you have enough saturation, where you have enough color saturation. This is the region, right? The colors that you pick from this region are very present, are very bold, are very dark, right? They are very saturated. So this is the region you should always go to whenever you want to choose any key color. So what I mean is this is light red. Don't choose this type of color for your primary key color. If you want to choose red as your primary key color, or any key color at all, right? Or any key color. If you want to choose red as any key color, make sure the red is picked from this region. You can see when I come here in this region, right? This region of the color picker, you'll see that the red color here is very present. It's very saturated. So this goes for any color you want to choose for any key color, not just for red and not just for the primary key color. If you want to choose any color at all for any key color here, make sure you pick that key color from this region where there is high color saturation, where there is high presence of that color. So if I want to choose a blue color now for, let's say, my secondary key color, don't come here and pick a blue color, right? Don't go to this region and pick a light blue color as your secondary key color. Your secondary key color should be within this region. Pick it within this region, right? You can see when I stay within this region, the level of blue color there is high. The color presence is high, right? So that's another tip I just felt like talking about. So Google recommends that you choose a primary key color, and I have told you what to have in mind when you want to choose a primary key color. After that, Google recommends that you pick a secondary key color also. And this secondary key color should complement the primary key color and should be able to live in harmony with the primary key color. Now, one very key thing you should have in mind: the secondary key color should not be a color that can call the user's attention away from the primary key color, because that's you having a secondary key color that is overshadowing the primary key color, or that is fighting for the same attention as the primary key color. So this should be a color that can live in harmony and can complement the primary key color. Now, Google also recommends that you come up with a tertiary key color. Now, the tertiary key color should also be a color that is not as present, right, in the eyes of the users like the primary key color. This should be another color that should complement the primary key color and also be able to live in harmony with the secondary and the primary key color. So for your tertiary key color, you wouldn't just come here and pick a very bright color that will take away the attention of the user from the primary key color. So also take note of that. The tertiary key color should be a color that can live in harmony with the secondary and the primary key color. Then Google goes for that to say that it should come up with an error key color. The error key color is going to be red, right? Because the error key color is the color that will be used for the displaying of error messages on the user interface of your application. Now, Google also recommends that you come up with a neutral key color. Now, the neutral key color is a color that is neutral. And when something is neutral, it means that thing is not taking sides, right? So the neutral key color is a color that can always stay on the app and people won't even notice that that color is there, right? The neutral key color should be a color that if you use it on your app, people will just use the app and not really notice that that color is there, right? That's what makes such a color, or that's what makes a color neutral, when people don't really notice it, but it's there, right? So the neutral key color would always be something close to black, something gray, right? Just always understand that. Whenever you want to pick a neutral key color, your neutral key color should always be something close to black, something dark, something within this region here, right? This should be the region you pick your neutral key color from, right? Or your neutral key colors from. Something close to black, something gray, something just like that, right? Something light dark. So that should be the region where you pick your neutral key colors from. Now, Google recommends that you come up with a neutral key color so that you can have more color options actually. because you can't just design a whole application with just the primary, secondary, and tertiary key colors, right? You need more color options in the process of designing your app, and the neutral key color will be used to create those options for you. Now, Google also recommends that you come up with a neutral variant key color. Now, this is still like the neutral key color, but this is like you having another neutral key color, like another version of your neutral key color. Take note also, this color should not be a color that would call the user's attention differently from the primary key color, right? This should also be a color that is neutral. This should also be another neutral color. The neutral variant key color is another neutral color. So it should be a color that can be neutral on the user interface. You shouldn't pick a color that would call the user's attention while the user is using the app. This should also be a color that can be there on the app and the users won't really take note that it's there. So this is like you having another neutral key color, right? But this is called the neutral variant key color. So it's still the same rules that you would use in choosing this that you would use in choosing this. The neutral variant key color is also there to expand your color options. It's also there for you to expand your color options. And we are going to see what it means when I say expand color options. But just know that the neutral key color and the neutral variant key color are there in your color system so that you can have more color options while designing your product. So Google recommends that we come up with these 6 key colors, and we have talked about the things to keep in mind when coming up with these 6 key colors. So the next thing is, Google says that after you come up with these 6 key colors, then you generate a tonal palette for each of these 6 key colors. And we saw how to do this in our session, all right? In all of our sessions, we have done this over and over again. We did this when we were designing a website without an application, and we are doing this now. So Google recommends that for the primary key color, you should come up with a tonal palette that has 13 tones. 13 tones. So for the primary key color now, we came up with a tonal palette with 13 tones. And these are the 13 tones here. 1, 2, take note. I am not counting this because this is the source color. This is the color that the UI color palette plugin used in generating these tones in the tonal palette. So this is the color. This first color here is the primary key color. That's our source color. I believe you all understand this. So the 13 tones are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So these are the 13 tones here, right? That we generated in the tonal palette of the primary key color, and we used the UI color palette plugin for that. Now, these 13 tones are to have specified or specific tonal values as recommended by Google. Now, Google is saying that for these 13 tones, the first tone here on the right should have a tonal value of 100. And when any color has a tonal value of 100, that color will be white. That's why you can't really see the color here, because it's there, but it's white. So it's kind of hidden because the background also is white. So there is a color here. That color has a tonal value of 100, which makes it white. The next color tone here in this tonal palette has a tonal value of 99, right? The next tone here in this tonal palette has a tonal value of 95. The next one here in the tonal palette has a tonal value of 90. The next tone here in the tonal palette has a tonal value of 80. You can write these down. The next tone here in the tonal palette has a tonal value of 70. The next tone here in the tonal palette has a tonal value of 60. The next tone here in the tonal palette has a tonal value of 50. The next tone here in the tonal palette has a tonal value of 40. The next tone here in the tonal palette has a tonal value of 30. The next tone here in the tonal palette has a tonal value of 20. The next tone here in the tonal palette, has a tonal value of 10. And the next tone here in the tonal palette has a tonal value of 0. So the first tone here on the left has a tonal value of 0, and the last tone here on the right, or the first tone here on the right, has a tonal value of 100. So a tonal value of 100 means the color will be white. A tonal value of 0 means that the color will be absolutely black. So this is what Google says that we should do for each of the key colors that we generate. So when you come up with a key color, you generate a tonal palette for that key color that contains 13 tones. And those 13 tones, right, those 13 tones will have specific tonal values. And I have just talked about the tonal values for each of the tone in the tonal palette. Now, using the UI color palette plugin, you would realize that when you want to set the tonal value of this tone here, the second tone on the right, you'd realize that when you want to set the tonal value of this second tone here on the right, it will be impossible for you to set it to 99 using the UI color palette plugin. Now, that's not a problem. When you try to set it to 99 and it's not allowing you to do that, you can just keep it to 98. You can set it to 98. Remember, this is a guide, right? So 99, 98, that's not too far from itself, right? So this is like a bug. This is a problem with the UI color palette plugin. So if you can't set yours to 99, then you just set it to 98. 98 still works. Now, this is me pointing this out because when you are creating this on your own, you might realize, or you would find out that with the UI color palette plugin, it will be impossible for you to set this tonal value of this color tone here to 99. So if it's not working for you, just set it to 98 and that's fine. So this is something that we will do for each key color. So for the secondary key color, we will generate a tonal palette with these 13 tones, right? Having those exact same tonal values. This is going to still be, this here is going to be 100 still. This will be 99. This will be 95. This will be 90 down to 0. Still the same tonal values for each of the tones, right, in the tonal palette. They are still going to have the exact same tonal value, starting from the right here with 100, 99, 95, 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, and 0. The same tonal values. For this tertiary key color, it's going to be the same thing. You generate a tonal value with, or you generate a tonal palette with 13 tones, and you'd assign the specified tonal values for each of the 13 tones in the tonal palette. This is going to be 100, also 99, 95, 90, down to 0. For the error key color, you'd also generate a tonal palette for the error key color, right? And the error key color would also have a tonal palette of 13 tones, and each of the 13 tones in the tonal palette would have the exact same tonal value, right, as specified by Google. This is going to be 100, 99, 95, 90, down to 0. You do the same thing for the neutral key color, and you do the same thing for the neutral variant key color. Now, what we have just done here is this. We have come up with a lot of colors from each of the key colors. That's what the tonal palette is meant for. You can see that with the tonal palette of the primary key color, we have given birth to more colors from this primary key color, right? Now, we just don't have the primary key color only. From the primary key color, we have given birth to 13 colors, right? So this primary key color has given birth to 13 new colors. Same for the secondary key color, same for the tertiary key color, same for the error, neutral color, and neutral variant key color. All these key colors have given birth to 13 colors each. So this is us having a lot of colors that we can work with. This is us having more options when we want to work with colors in the designing of our app. So having all of this means that you are beginning to have a robust color system. You are beginning to have a bank of colors. You are beginning to build your bank of colors that you can always run to whenever there is need for you to use colors in the designing of your application. So Google says when you create these tonal palettes, right? When you create tonal palettes for each of the key colors, the next thing you should do is to then derive color roles from these tonal palettes. Now, the reason why we are deriving color roles, or the meaning, right, behind deriving color roles is this. We need to now go to the tonal palette and start picking colors from the tonal palette, right, that will be playing a function. It's not just sensible for us to have all of these colors in the tonal palette and start using them randomly, right? It is just the same thing. When you have let's say you have you have a building project, right? You have a building project and you call for workers who want to build that house for you, right? When you call for workers and you have, let's say, 500 engineers and technicians show up, when you have 500 workers show up for the building project, you won't just open your gates and tell the 500 of them to start working, right? That's not how you do it when you want to build a house, right? You won't just open the gate of the house and ask the 500 engineers or the 500 technicians to start building however they want to build the house. No, what you would do is, out of the 500 engineers, you would start picking engineers that you will assign functions to. You would pick one person and say, you would handle the fixing of the toilet, you would handle the fixing of the doors, you would handle the tiling of the floor, you would handle the fixing of the windows. That's how you do it, right? You won't just open the gate and ask the 500 engineers to start building the way they like, right? That way you'd have an uncoordinated process. If you do it that way, you'd have an uncoordinated process, right? So it's the same logic here. Now we have a lot of colors, right? In our color palette, we have a lot of colors in our color palette. Now, when we want to start building the app, when we want to start designing the app, we won't just pick any random color from the color palette and use it in the process of designing the app. We won't just say, okay, when we want to design a button, let's come here in the tertiary key colors color palette and just pick any color. Then when we want to design another button, we come to the secondary key colors color palette and pick another color. No, we won't do it randomly like that, right? This is just the same thing as you opening the gates to your 500 workers and asking them to build the house the way they like. No, you have to assign functions, right, to each of the engineer. You have to assign roles to each of the engineer that wants to build the house, so that they know what they will be doing. They know the part they will be playing in the building of your house. It's the same thing. Now, Google recommends that we come here in our color palettes that we have generated and start assigning roles, right? And start assigning roles to colors from the color palette. So technically, what we have to do here is to go to the color palette, pick a color, then assign a role to that color. That color will now be playing that role. That color will be playing that function on the user interface of your application. Now, for these color roles, Google, right, has a documentation that guides us on how we should pick color to play these roles. Google actually spell out the roles that the colors can play, right? Google spell out the roles that the colors can play, and Google also goes for that to tell us how we can go to the color palette and pick a color that will play each of the role that they have specified. So let's go to the material design guide. Let's hover here on styles, click on the color drop down, then let's click on color schemes, and let's click on static. Right, now if you come here, you scroll down, you would see that actually these are the color roles, right? These are the color roles here that Google specifies that any color can play. So these are the color roles that Google says that any color can play on the user interface of your app, right? So if you come down here, you'll see how Google is going to recommend the picking or the choosing of colors that will play those roles. So these are the color roles, right? These are the color role categories rather. So there is the primary color category for color roles, right? If you click on this drop down, you'd see all the primary color roles. You have the primary color role here, the main primary color role itself. You have the on-primary color role. You have the primary container color role. You have the on-primary container color role. Now, these are roles that should be played by a color from your color palettes. These roles, right, are roles that you will assign to a color that you choose from your color palette. Take note of this. So for the primary role, for this primary color role, right, this primary role, how are we going to choose a color that will play this role? How do we assign this role to a color? That's the question to ask. How do we assign this role to a color? Right? Google gives us a guide on how we can do that. So if you come here, when you click on the primary, when you click on primary here, you would see that there is a color token that is being displayed here. And if you look at the color token here, right, not this one. If you look at this one here, you'd see that there's a color token that says md.ref.palette.primary40. Basically, this is Google telling us that the way you should pick a color that will play this role is for you to go to the color palette. You can see there is ref.palette, like we are referencing a color palette. Google will ask us to reference a color palette, which means go to a color palette. So Google is saying that we should go to a color palette. Which color palette? The color palette that has a tonal value with primary 40. So basically, actually, this is what Google is saying. Google is saying that go to the tonal palette of the primary key color and pick the color in that tonal palette. Pick the color tone in that tonal palette that has a tonal value of 40. That is the color that will play the primary role. That's what Google is saying. That's how Google is recommending we choose colors that will play these roles. So Google is saying that for the primary role, for the primary color role, go to the tonal palette of the primary key color that you had generated, right? And in that tonal palette, pick the color tone in that tonal palette that has a tonal value of 40. That color should be the color that will play the primary role. But if you remember in our last session, I made mention of making excuses or making an exception to this primary color here, because the primary color is supposed to be the brand color. The primary color is supposed to be the color that you want your users to always remember when they visit your product, right? So this color here, when we are trying to choose a color that will play this role, personally, I would recommend to you that your primary key color should be the color that will play the primary color role on your user interface. This is because you took time to choose your primary key color, right? This primary key color, like I always say, is the brand color of your product, right? That's the brand color of your product. So I would also advise you that this color that is the brand color of your product should be the color that will play the primary color role on your user interface. It's not going to make sense for us to have the brand color of our product, then we come here and choose this color in the tonal palette as the primary color on our user interface. It's not going to make much sense because this particular color now is different from this, which is the brand color. So if I use this to design the app now as my primary color, it means that when the users come to my app, they will remember this color, which is not the color. This is the color now I would use, or this is the color that the users would use to remember my app, right? And this color is not the brand color. So this is an exception for choosing colors, or for choosing the color that will play the primary color role. So, but actually, like I always say, it's a guide. This is Google giving you a recommendation on how you can choose the primary color, right? Now, for the on-primary color role, or for the on-primary color here, Google is recommending that this color, right, should be chosen from the tonal palette of the primary key color also. When you go to the tonal palette of the primary key color, Google says that in that tonal palette, choose the color tone that has the tonal value of 100. As you can see, there is primary 100. This primary 100 simply means the color tone in the primary key color, the color tone in the tonal palette of the primary key color that has a tonal value of 100. That's what primary 100 means. Google is simply saying that go to the tonal palette of the primary key color and choose the color tone that has the tonal value of 100. That color should be the color that would play the role of on primary. Now, there is one thing I also want you to take note of. Whenever you click on any of these roles, you would see a hint, or you'd see a little documentation on how these color roles can be used. If you click on primary, you would see it says text and icons shown against the primary color. So this simply means the on primary color should be the color that you would give to any text that you use to write on your primary color, right? So there is the primary container role. The primary container role, Google recommends that the way you would pick a color that will play this role is this. go to the tonal palette of the primary key color and choose the color tone that has the tonal value of 90. That color should be the color that you would assign the primary container role to. That's how you choose a color that you would assign this primary container role to. Very easy. So what you do is you would come here in the tonal palette of your primary key color and you would look for that color tone that has the tonal value of 90. Now in our own case, which color tone here has the tonal value of 90? This first tone on the right is 100, this is 99, this is 95, and this is 90. So in that case, in my own case here, this is what's going to be the color that will play the primary container role, right? As recommended by Google. So that's why I would select the color, copy the color code of this color. When I copy the color code, then I would come here and I would create a little rectangle and I would paste the color code and I would give it a tag, primary container. This is me simply specifying that this is the color that will be playing my primary container role in my design. So that's how it's done, right? So there's another color role here called on primary container, and Google still recommends Google still recommends the process in which you can use to choose a color that will play this role. So for this role, which is the on primary container role, Google still tells you that you should go to the tonal palette of the primary key color and choose the color tone that has the tonal value of 10. As you can see, there is primary 10 here. That's what Google is simply telling you. Go to the tonal value of the primary key color and choose the color tone that has the tonal value of 10. That color should be the color that will play the on primary container role. And that's what I did basically. I went to the tonal palette of the primary key color and I chose this color here. This is the color tone that has the tonal value of 10 because this is 0, this is 10. So I picked the color code of this particular color tone and I assigned the on primary container role, and I assigned the on primary container role to that color. Very simple. If you close this, the next set of color roles are the secondary color roles, right? When I expand this, you see we have secondary color, on secondary color, secondary container, and on secondary container. And for each of these roles, Google will always recommend the process that you should take in choosing the colors that will play this role. For the secondary role here, you can see the color token. It ends with .secondary40, right? Palette.secondary40. Google is simply telling you that the way you would choose a color that will play this role is for you to go to the tonal palette of the secondary key color and pick the color tone there that has a tonal value of 40. That's what Google is saying. When you pick that color tone that has a tonal value of 40, then that color, right, should be the color that will play the secondary color role. There is the on secondary color role here, and Google recommends how you can pick a color that will play this role, right? Google is simply saying go to the tonal palette of the secondary key color and pick the color tone in that tonal palette that has a tonal value of 100. That's the color tone, or that's the color that you should assign the on secondary role to. Same for secondary container, same for on secondary container. You would follow the same process to pick the colors that will play these roles. Now, for tertiary colors also, if you click on tertiary here, there is a recommendation, or there is a process in which you can use. For on tertiary, there is a process. For tertiary container, there is a process. And for on tertiary container, there is a process. You would go through the same process. Right? So then we have error colors. Of course, it's the same process. When you click on error here, you would see the color token, and you would see that for this error color here, the color that will play the error role, right? Google is saying that the way to choose that color that will play the error role is simple. Go to the tonal palette of the error key color and pick a color tone in that tonal palette that has the tonal value of 40. That color should be the color that you will assign the error role to. That's what I did here also, right? You can see this is the color that I assigned the error role to. And how did I get this color? I went here to the tonal palette of the error key color and I picked the color tone that has the tonal value of 40. This is 0, this is 10, 20, 30, 40. So this is the color here that has the tonal value of 40, and that's the color that I picked and assigned the error role to. Very simple, right? So on error, there's a recommendation. Error container, there's a recommendation. And on error container also has the recommendation in which you can use to pick a color that will play this role. I would close this. Now for surface colors, right? This is a bit tricky because we are going to modify the tonal values, right? When we are trying to pick colors that will play these roles. So I would want you to pay a little more attention here. All right. So for the surface color, there is a role called surface, right? Google wants us to pick a color that will play this role called surface. You can see a little description about this role, right? Google simply says this is a role or this is a color. When you pick a color for this role, that color should be used for components like cards, sheets, and menus, right? We all know what a card is, right? So Google is simply saying that when you pick a color that will play this surface role, that color should be a color that you can use for the background of your cards, right? And so on and so forth. Don't worry about the application for now. We are going to see that very soon. So the surface role or the surface color role, right, should be played by a color tone in the tonal palette of the neutral key color that has a tonal value of 98. Now, this is it in simple terms. Google is telling you, Google is saying, right, that for you to pick a color that will play the surface role, go to the tonal palette of the neutral key color. You can see there is neutral 98 here. Go to the tonal palette of the neutral key color and pick a color tone in that tonal palette that has a tonal value of 98. That's what Google is saying. Pick a color tone in that tonal palette that has a tonal value of 98. So if you come here now to the color palette of the neutral key color, now, if you don't have any color tone in this tonal value that has a tonal value of 98, now this is what you do, right? At this stage, you would select the color palette for the neutral key color again. You'd select it again, and you'd bring up the UI color palette plugin while this tonal palette is selected. Take note, right? When I bring up the UI color palette plugin, I can now see all the color tones for this tonal palette. You can see I have one here down to 13, right? Which is what we already did. This is something we already worked on, and we all know how to work with this. So if you don't have a tonal value of 98, you'd look for the color tone in the tonal palette already that has a tonal value close to 98. For example, let's say this one here, right? It's 98 already in my case, but let's say I don't have a tonal value, or let's say I don't have a color tone with a tonal value of 98. What I'll do is I would come here and I would look for a color tone that has a tonal value close to 98, click on that color tone or double click on that color tone, and then set its tonal value to 98. Now you see that if I adjust the tonal value here from 98 to, let's say, 92, watch what's going to happen to the color tone that had 98 initially. You can see it has changed, right? If I say 94, you'd see that it is going to change, right? Let's say, okay, 97 is not working. Let's say 98 once more. Watch here, it's going to change. You can see the color tone, right, that has that tonal value would change. So when it changes to 98, it means that this color tone now has a tonal value of 98. So I can now select this color tone now and assign the surface color role to it. So that's how you come up with color tones with tonal values that you don't already have in your tonal palette. So Google is saying that for the surface color here, or for the surface role, the way you would pick a color that will play this role is simple. Go to the tonal palette of the neutral key color and pick a color tone that has the tonal value of 98. For the on surface here, for the on surface role, go to the tonal palette of the neutral key color and pick a color tone that has the tonal value of 10. For the surface variant here, take note, for the surface variant role, Google is saying that you should go to the color palette of the neutral variant key color. As you can see over here, we have neutral variant 90. So Google is saying that for the surface variant role, you should go to the color palette of the neutral variant key color and pick a color tone there that has the tonal value of 90. That's what Google is saying. Then for the on-surface variant role, Google is telling you that you should go to the tonal palette of the neutral variant key color also and pick the color tone there that has a tonal value of 30. That color tone should be the color that will play the on-surface variant role. Now, if you come here, we have other surface colors, right? Or other surface roles. We have surface container highest rather. And you can see Google is saying that the way you'd pick a color that will play this role is simple. Go to the tonal palette of the neutral key color and pick the color tone that has the tonal value of 90. That color tone should play the surface container highest role. Then we have surface container high. Now, if you take a look at the recommendations, right, for choosing a color that will play the surface container high role, you would see that Google is saying that we should go to the tonal palette of the neutral key color and pick a color tone there that has the tonal value of 92. Now, based on how we created our tonal values initially, we did not have a color tone that has a tonal value of 92. So the way to do this is what I just did some moments ago. Go back to your color palette for the neutral key color, bring up the UI color palette plugin, and then look for a color tone that has a tonal value close to 92. Like you can see this color tone, which is the fourth one. 1, 2, 3, 4. This color tone, which is the fourth color tone here, has a tonal value of 93, which is close to 92. So what I'll do in this case is I'll double click on this color tone and change its tonal value to 92. When I change it to 92, the color tone here, right, in the tonal palette will adjust its brightness, right? So this will now adjust to having a tonal value of 92. So when it's adjusted like this, then I can close this, unlock the layer once more, then come here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then pick this color tone now, because currently it now has a tonal value of 92. So now I can now pick it, copy the color code. I can select it now, copy its color code, and assign this surface container high role to it, which is what I did here, right? Surface container high. This is it, surface container high. So that's how you pick, or that's how you adjust the tonal values. That's how you adjust the tonal values, right, of the color tones in your tonal palette. So if there is a tonal value you don't have in your tonal palette, you can always use the UI color palette plugin to adjust the tonal values of your color tones in your tonal palette, right? So please don't forget that step, right? You can always do that. Now there's another role here called surface container. This is how you pick the color that will play that role. That color should be a color tone in the tonal palette of the neutral key color that has a tonal value of 94. So you should go to the tonal palette of your neutral key color and pick a color tone there that has a tonal value of 94. Now, if you don't have a color tone in the tonal palette of a neutral key color that has a tonal value of 94, you just saw how we adjusted the tonal value of a color tone in our tonal palette. So you go ahead and do that, right? You go back and you go back to the tonal palette of the neutral key color, pick a color tone that already has a tonal value close to 94 and adjust the tonal value to 94. When you adjust the tonal value to 94, then you come here in the color palette, then pick that adjusted tone now that has a tonal value of 94, pick it and assign the surface container role to it. Same goes for the surface container. This is 96. You do the adjustments. There is surface container, which is neutral 100. Now we all know how to pick colors that will play all of these roles, right? All you just have to do is click on the role, then see the recommendations on how you can pick colors that will play the role. As simple as that. So we have surface tint here. You can see, you go ahead, use the same process. So that's it. When you are done picking all of your surface colors, the next color row or the next set of color rows here will be the outline color rows. And if you expand this, you see we just have two roles only under outline colors. We have the outline role and the outline variant role. So for the outline role, Google is saying that you should go to the tonal palette of the neutral variant key color and pick the color tone there that has a tonal value of 50. That color tone should be the color or should be the color tone that will play the outline role. That's how Google recommends we pick a color that will play this outline role. For the outline variant role, Google is recommending that for the outline variant role, we go to the tonal palette of the neutral variant key color and pick the color tone in that tonal palette that has a tonal value of 80. That color should be the color that will play the outline variant role. Very simple. Very simple. Now, we have another set of color rows here which are called add-ons. Now, these are just additional colors that you can have in your color system. Remember, it's a color system, right? Remember, it's a color system. So we need to have more color options, even though we don't end up using 50% of them. It's very important you have color options, right? If you look at the default Figma color system, right? If you look at the default Figma color system, which is this, right? There are tons of colors here you would never use, right? Or that you wouldn't use on a project. But that doesn't mean that Figma should make the color system to be limited. That doesn't mean that the color picker should only display 12 options to everybody using it. No, it's a color system. This is the default Figma color system. There are lots of colors that you can choose from, right? This makes you to have options. It makes you to have options while you are designing in Figma, right? So this is the same thing that you, or this is the same thing, or this is something similar, right, to what we do here when creating a color system. When creating a color system, we are trying to build a system with enough color options that can serve us throughout the designing of our application, right? So Google added this new set of color rows called add-ons. Add-ons are just there to build your options, right? Like you're having additional color rows or additional options to work with while designing. So if you expand add-ons, you'd see we have 4 categories under add-ons. We have add-on primary colors, add-on secondary colors. This is simply like additional primary colors, additional secondary colors, right? Additional tertiary color rows, additional surface color rows. That's just what these add-ons stand for or mean actually, right? This is like you're saying additional primary color rows, additional secondary color rows, and so on and so forth. So if I expand the add-on primary colors, you see we have about 5 add-on primary color rows, right? About 5. So this is just like us having additional 5 primary color rows that we can put in our color system to increase our color options. So there is this add-on primary color role called the primary fixed role. When you click on it, you'd see how Google is recommending we choose the color that will play this role. If you click on primary fixed, you would see how Google is recommending we pick a color that will play this role. If you click on primary fixed dim, you'd see how Google is recommending we pick a color that will play this role. If you click on primary fixed variant, you'd see how Google is recommending we pick a color that will play this role. It's very easy. Now we know how to read these tokens, right? We know how to understand this. So for example, this is you simply going to the color palette of the primary key color and picking a color tone in that tonal palette rather that has a tonal value of 30. Very simple. So we have the inverse primary role, and this is you simply going to the tonal palette of the primary key color and picking a color tone in that tonal palette that has a tonal value of 80. That color should be used to play the inverse primary role. So these are additional roles that you'd have in your color system. Like you can see, I had already derived all these roles in my own case here, right? We have the inverse, we have the primary fixed dim, inverse primary, on secondary fixed dim, right? You can see we have a very robust color system here, right? This is a robust color system. So with a color system like this, I will not see the need to go to the default Figma's color system to choose a color while I am designing my application, right? So if you can come here, we have add-on secondary color rows, also all of this, right? You would use the same pattern to pick colors that will play these roles. We have the add-on tertiary color roles. You can see we have tertiary fixed, untertiary fixed, untertiary fixed, variant, and tertiary fixed dim. You would use the same process to pick colors that will play those roles. Then we have add-on surface colors, right? We have background here. Now this is a role that you can use, or this is a role that's, if you give to a color, that color can be serving as the background color in your design. So we have background, on background, surface bright, surface dim. We have scream, right? Scream is basically the type or the color that you would use for pop-ups. When pop-ups or when modals appear at the center of your screen, you can use the scream. You can use the color that is playing this role to implement a background overlay, right? When you implement that background overlay, then you reduce the opacity. That's something you can do on your own. Then we have a color that can be used for shadows. Of course, by default in Figma recommends we use black colors for our shadow colors, and afterwards we reduce the opacity to make it soft, right? So Google is still recommending you use black colors for your shadows, right? But of course, the opacity of the black color will be reduced eventually. So, but the color has to be black first before the opacity is reduced. You can see it's the same recommendation Google is recommending here, right? So don't worry about scream and shadow if you don't understand it. Now, for scream, like I've said, if you go to our low fidelity design, right? When this connect GitHub accounts pop-up or modal shows up here, right? You can see that the background of the user interface is now sort of dark. It's having this overlay effect, right? So that the user can see this clearly. Now, the color that you would use to do this overlay effect, the color that will be used to implement this effect, right, that is implemented currently here, is the scream color. Google recommends that that color should be black. But when you are using it, right, you would have to reduce the opacity so that it can be transparent. The black color can be transparent just like this, right? But it has to be black first. Then you reduce the opacity to make it transparent just like this. So that's what Google is saying, right? So Google is saying your scream color should be black, your shadow color should be black. But for the scream color and the shadow color, the opacity will be reduced when you are making use of it in the user or on the user interface of your application. So this is how to choose all of the color roles, right? This is how to choose all of the color roles as recommended, or this is how to choose colors that will play all of the color roles as recommended by Google, right? This is how to choose all of the color roles, or rather, sorry about that. This is how to choose all of the colors that will play all of the color roles as recommended by Google, right? So someone called me actually, and I'm being distracted. So it's very easy like this. It's as easy as this. So currently we have seen how to choose the colors that will play all of the color roles as recommended by Google. So you choose all of those colors and you have them outlined the way I have outlined mine here. So in a nutshell, Google says you should choose 6 key colors first, generate a tonal palette for each of the 6 key colors, right? And while generating the tonal palette, you use the specified tonal values, right, for each of the color tone in the tonal palette. After you do that, then you generate or you derive color roles from the tonal palette. Now, these color roles or these colors that are playing all of these roles will now have a specified or a specific function on the user interface of your application. Now, this is the same thing as you picking individuals from the 300 engineers who want to build your house and giving them a role to play in the building of the house. So this is like you picking one engineer and saying you would be the one to fix the toilets, You'd be the one to fix the kitchen cabinet. You'd be the one to fix the windows. You'd be the one to fix the doors. This is like you now assigning roles or assigning functions to each engineer among the 300 engineers that came to build your house. Right, this is just it. Now, all of these colors have a specific function, or they all have a specific role to play on the user interface of your application. So I believe this is now clearer, right? I believe this is now clearer. So this is all you need to do. Now, the next thing to do after you have created the color system like this is to save the color system to your style library, because we can't always come here to copy the color code when we want to use them, right? We can't always come here and click on a color, then copy the color code and then go and use it, right? When designing. No, we need to save all of them to our color system in our style library. We need to save all of them to our style library. So I had already done mine because we are going to use this in learning, right? So I had already done mine. Now, just the same way we saved the text styles, right, in our style library by first of all creating a folder called product typography, then having subfolders for each of the text weight variants, right? Just the same way we created this using the folder structure is the same way we are going to have a folder structure for saving our colors. So I would first of all create a folder. Okay, I'd first of all create a folder called product colors. Now this / makes this a folder. When I create that folder called product colors, then I would create a folder inside that product colors folder now for all my key colors, because I don't want to save all the key colors in the same folder that I would have all of these color tones in the tonal palette. So I would create a folder that will save all the key colors, the 6 key colors. So I would come here inside this folder now called product colors. I would create another folder called key colors. The / now makes this a folder. Now, for the primary key color, for example, if I want to save the primary key color now, I would go into that folder, which is for the key colors, and I would come here and I would just say primary key color. That's how I would save the primary key color. So what I have done here is I have saved the primary key color inside the key colors folder, which is inside the product colors folder. This is the main folder here that will save everything. But inside this folder, I have just created another folder, which is going to save all my key colors. If I want to save the secondary key color, I would still save it this way. I would say product key colors, then go to the key colors folder, and then I would save the secondary key color, just like this, right? So that's how I would save all of the key colors. Now let's come here and let's see an example of that. So let's say I want to save this as my primary key color, right? I would select it, click on styles there, or click on style there, then click on the plus sign here. Then the way I would save it is to just write the name of the main folder first, which is product colors. That's the name of the main folder, product colors. Put the / there to make sure it is now a folder. Then since this is a key color, I I would then create another folder called key colors, put the /. After that, then I'll put the name of this key color that I'm trying to save. This is the primary key color. Then I would say primary key color without any /. Then I would click on create style. Now, when I go to my style library in this file, you'd see I have a folder called product colors. When I expand it, I have another subfolder inside of it called key colors. And when I open the key colors folder, you can see I now have the primary key color there. So if there's another color here that I want to save as my secondary key color, for example, I would keep the color selected. Let's say this is the color here as my secondary key color. I would keep the color selected, come here, and I would start with the name of the main folder first, which is product colors / key colors, because I want to save this secondary key color in the key colors folder also. So I would say key colors, then I'll say forward slash, then I'll write the name. I would say secondary key color. When I save that and I go to my style library, you'd see when I expand the product colors folder, you can see that I now have the key colors subfolder inside of it. When I open the key colors folder, I have my two key colors, primary key color, secondary key color. So this is how you would save all the key colors. You would make sure all the key colors are saved inside the key colors folder. So that's how to save the key colors. Then for the color tones in the tonal palette, right? You can see we have a tonal palette of 13 color tones, right? We have a tonal palette of 13 color tones. So this one has a tonal value of 0, the first one here. This is 10, 20, 30. Now, all of them would also be saved to your style library. All of the color tones in all your tonal palettes will be saved to your style library. But how do we save them, or what do we call them when we save them? Because remember, we are saving them there so that they also help us to make the color system robust, right? We can come back and maintain this color system later. And while maintaining the color system, we might need these color tones, right? So they have to be saved to the style library also. So how do we save them, or what do we call them? We call them reference colors, because if you come here, you would see that Google always references them when Google wants to choose a color that will play a role. You can see there is md.ref, which is MD stands for material design, ref stands for reference. Then what is Google referencing? The palette, right? So all the color tones in the tonal palette are called reference colors. Those are the colors, right, that we reference or that we go to, or those are the colors that we run to whenever we want to pick a color that we will assign a role to. So all the colors in the tonal palette are reference colors. They are reference colors, right? So for example, if I want to save this tone, this color tone in this color palette, let's say this color palette is for the primary key color, right? If I want to save this color tone in this tonal palette, what I'll do is I would select the color tone. Then I would come here. Let's write the folder structure. It's still going to be product colors. Remember, product colors is the general folder that will save everything. So I would say product colors, and I would say reference colors. Then I would then say primary 0. Why am I saying primary 0? I'm saying primary 0 because I am trying to save a color tone in the primary key colors tonal palette that has a tonal value of 0. This color tone has a tonal value of 0, and this color tone is in the tonal palette of the primary key color. So that's why I'm using its tonal value to label it, right? I'm just saying primary 0, which means this is the color tone in the primary key colors tonal palette that has a tonal value of 0. That's why I'm calling that particular color primary 0, because it has a tonal value of 0. So this is the folder structure I would use for saving the reference colors. So I would come here. If I select this, I would click on style, and I would write the name. I would first of all say product colors, right? Product colors. Then I'll put my forward slash there to indicate that it's a folder. Then I'll say reference colors, put a forward slash there, right, to indicate that it's a folder. Then after that, what's the name of the color that I want to save as a reference color? So I would call this primary 0. Primary 0, to indicate that this color tone has a tonal value of 0. Then I'd click on create style, and it will be saved. Now, if I go to my style library, you'd see that in the product colors folder, we have two subfolders now. The first subfolder is called key colors, and it contains all my key colors. The second subfolder is called reference colors, and it contains all my reference colors, all the color tones in my tonal palette, right? This first one here is called primary 0. If I save this next one, it's going to be primary 10, right? So I would come here. To make this very easy, just always copy this folder structure, leave the name because the name of the color tone will always change. Copy that, come here, then paste it. Then after the / there, you write the name of this color tone. So that is primary 10, right? Primary 10, save that. I would select this and I would do the same thing. I would call that primary 20, save that. Do this here, primary 30, primary 40. That's how I would save all the color tones in the tonal palette of the primary key color. When you go to the tonal palette of the secondary key color, you would still save all the tonal palettes with secondary 0, secondary 10, secondary 20. Same thing for the error key color, same thing for the tonal, for the color tones in the tonal palette of the error key color. Same thing for the color tones in the tonal palette of the tertiary key color. Same thing for the neutral key colors tonal palette. Same thing for the neutral variant key colors tonal palette. Same thing for all of those color tones. You would always save them using the name or using their tonal value. You would always save them using their tonal value. So if it's error 20, error 30, error 40, error 0, error 10, just like that, that's how you'd save them, right? And all of those colors will be put in the reference colors folder. All of the colors. So let me make that very easy to understand also. So let's say now this is the tonal palette rather of the secondary key color. You would come here also, select this first one or select this, then you'd go here, you'd say product color still, reference colors. You still want to put all the color tones in all the tonal palettes in the reference colors folder. Please take note, no matter the tonal palette, all the color tones in the tonal palette would also go into the reference colors folder, right? So then after the reference colors folders / you would put the name of the reference color. So let's say this is for the secondary key colors tonal palette. I would say secondary 10. I would save that. That's how you do with all of the reference colors. After that, after you have saved all of the reference colors, right, into the reference colors folder, it will be time for you to save the colors that are plain roles, right, into your style library also. And what you do in this case is you would create another folder, right, that will be dedicated to saving all the colors that are plain roles. So let's say this is the color plain, the primary role. I would select it. I would come here to save it. I would still save it inside the product colors main folder. So I would say product colors, put a / there, and I would say color row, right? Color row, that's going to be another folder. That folder will be the folder that will be saving all the colors that are plain rows. I would say color row, then I would say primary. That's all. I would save. If you go to my style library now, we have product colors, which is the main color folder. If you expand it, we have 3 subfolders. The key colors subfolder storing all the key colors, the reference colors folder storing all the reference colors, and the color role folder storing all the colors that have been assigned a role. As simple as that. So that's what I have here in my own style library. You can see I have product colors here. I have the key colors subfolder. I have the reference colors subfolder, and I have the role colors subfolder, or the color rows subfolder. If you expand the role color subfolder here, you can see these are all the colors that have been assigned role, and these are all of the roles, right? On tertiary, on primary, inverse, on surface, these are all of them here. Then if you expand the reference color subfolder, you can see all the reference colors in my color system, right? These are all the colors that are in all my tonal palettes, right? From primary 0 to primary 100, from secondary 0 to secondary 100, from tertiary 0 to tertiary 100, from error 0 to error 100, and so on and so forth, right? These are all of my reference colors. Then these are all of my key colors, just the 6 key colors. These are all of them here. And all of these subfolders that are storing different types of colors are all inside the product colors folder. So now we have created a typography system and we have saved it to our style library. And we have created a color system also that we have saved to our style library. So I believe this is clear. So this is a complete recap on creating a color system using the material design guide. So this is how Google advises that you create a color system using the material design guide. And we have seen how to do this, and we have gone for that to see how to save these color styles to our style library. Now over to the second thing that we are to talk about in this video. We are to announce the third portfolio task in the bootcamp in this video. And this is to be done by every individual. This task is also going to affect the awarding of your certificates, right, at the end of the bootcamp. So every student is mandated to participate in the task because it's going to be published to your Behance profile also. So what's the task all about? The task is simple. Come up with a color system that is documented. So basically what we want you to do is to come up with a documentation about the material design color system, right? Come up with a color system like I have done here, but don't just put the colors out like this, right? This is not how you would present the assignment. You would first of all talk about the material design guide and how it advises that we come up with colors for our color system. You talk about the material design guide and how it talks about colors for color system. Then you talk about the key colors, how users should come up with their key colors, right? You'd write little, not very lengthy text, right? Very little text guiding users on how they can come up with their key colors, or guiding designers on how they can come up with their key colors. Then you'd also talk about the tonal palette generation, right? You'd also talk about the tonal palette generation and the tonal values that should be given to each tone in the tonal palette. Then you'd explain why the tonal palette is necessary, right? You'd also explain why the tonal palette is necessary. So this is something you do step by step. You won't just randomly, or you won't just go straight to the point and just generate a color system, right? You'd explain the process. You'd explain the importance of everything that you are doing in the process of coming up with the color system. So it's more like a documentation, or it's more like you presenting your process, right? So at the end of the day, you do all of that. You present it on one layout and you post it to your Behance account, right? This is also to show that you understand colors. This is to show that you understand how to come up with an organized color system that can be integrated into a design system, because this is how colors that are integrated into design systems are generated. This is how they are structured. So you need to also show that you understand the process of how to do that. You need to show that you can be integrated into a design team that runs on a design system, right? That's the reason for this task. It's important you let anyone that's trying to hire you know your strengths, right? So you'd come up with this documentation that I'm explaining now, and you'd post it to your Behance account. So let me give a good summary on what you are expected to do. So you'd explain the primary key color, right? And give a hint or two on how a designer should come up with their primary key color, right? Also, talk about the level of importance of the primary key color. You do same for the secondary key color. Talk about how designers should come up with the secondary key colors and how secondary key colors should be. You do the same for tertiary key color. You'd explain what the tertiary key color should be like, how designers can choose tertiary key colors, right? Then you'd also talk about error key colors, neutral key colors, and neutral variance key colors. I had already explained how these colors should be and what you should keep in mind when choosing all of these colors. Then you'd move over, right, to talk about the need for generating a tonal palette for each of the key colors, right? You'd move over to talk about that. So you'd explain to the designers reading your documentation that for the primary key color and for every key color you generate a tonal, you'd create a tonal palette with 13 color tones. And for the color tones, the 13 color tones, the first one here would have a tonal value of 0. The second one here would have a tonal value of 99. You'd explain down to this. You'd spell out the tonal values for all of the color tones. And you'd explain to them why this tonal palette is very, very necessary. This is you building your color options because you are trying to create a color system that would serve you throughout the designing of your app. You are trying to build a color system that would ensure that you do not visit the default Figma color system or the default Figma color picker while you are designing your product. So you'd explain to the designers in that documentation why the tonal palettes are important. And you talk about the material design recommendation, which says you should generate 13 tones with those specific tonal values for each of the tones. After that, then you talk about color roles. You explain in that documentation, right? You explain in that documentation, right, why the color roles are now important and how you should pick a color that will play each of the role, right? So you'd spell out all the color roles that material design recommends that we should have, right? You'd spell out all the color roles that material design recommends that we designers should have. So these are the color roles: primary, on primary, down to this one here, on tertiary, fixed variant. So you would first of all spell out all the color roles. Then you talk about how the designers can pick a color that will play each of this role. You'd also talk about that, right, in the documentation. This is just like you breaking down the steps of how a designer can come up with a color system as recommended by the material design guide. But you are going for that to explain the process, right? But you are going for that to tell the designers what they should do, how they should do it, what they should not do, what they should avoid, and so on and so forth. This is like you breaking down the process more than it was broken down in the material design guide, right? Now, while you are explaining all of this, you'd also come up with a primary key color. You wouldn't just mention primary key color and not display primary key color. Like I said, you would come up with your own color system, but while you are coming up with the color system, or while you have come up with the color system, you would explain your process. You'd break down your process, right, behind your own color system. You would break down the process. You would explain the process. You would make it a documentation that designers can look at and learn from, right? So you would come up with your own color system. So it's not just you writing text. This is not to be published on Medium, right? This is not to be published on LinkedIn or Twitter. This is you coming up with a design frame, right? You would do it in Figma. You'd come up with your color system. Then you'd explain the process here in the color system. You'd explain the process behind the whole decisions you made while coming up with your color system. So this is not something you do in Google Docs. You do it here in Figma, right? So when you are done with the whole color system generation and the documentation around the color system, you present it to look very, very, very presentable, right? You'd present it to look very presentable. Then you publish it to your Behance account. The deadline for this task is Friday this week. So thank you all and thank you all. This is where we are going to call it a wrap for this video. Let me know if the video was helpful and if you understood the color system better with the video. Thank you very much.